I'd like to welcome everyone to the AO Journal Club on femoral shaft fractures.
This unreamed intramedullary nailing of the femur, comparison of the rate of ARDS in multiply injured patients. With me, I have Dr. Leighton, one of the senior authors on the paper. Hi, Dr. Leighton.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
So I will quickly just summarize for the listeners that this was a randomized control trial and roughly 300 patients with injury severity scores of greater than 18 were recruited and assigned to receive either a reamed or an unreamed intramedullary femoral nail within 24 hours of admission.
Right.
The primary outcome was basically the development or not of ARDS. And the key finding was really that there was no difference between the two groups.
Yeah.
So Dr. Leighton, these results were in contrast to some other studies that were previously published around that time or prior to it. Can you please summarize for us what those studies were and the impetus for this randomized control trial?
Yeah, well, to put it in perspective, we first started a trial to look at reamed versus unreamed nailing. So that was the first study we did with the cost group, and that had about 200 patients in it, 230 patients. And what we showed very definitively, and it's been repeated over and over, is that minimally reamed nails are way better than reamed nails as far as than unreamed nails as far as complications are concerned. So you can make a case for either one, but if you look at a bunch of patients and look at them, then the complication rate of the smaller unreamed nails is greater. So from that group, we decided that we'd see if we could make any suggestions about ARDS, and it was too small a group, so we increased the group size to 300 and some, as you pointed out. Now at that time, there's a lot of controversy coming mostly out of Germany with Pape's paper and things saying that if you had an associated lung injury or multiple traumatized patient, that damage control surgery was better, that was kind of thing, or unreamed nails were better than reamed nails, so anything that didn't affect the intramedullary canal as much would be better for the patient. And our literature in North America just didn't match that, so we couldn't match that. So we decided that we would try to see whether in this group we had of 200, if we increased to 300 or 400 patients, would it show a difference in the ARDS groups? That was the impetus for the paper. I think the real controversy seems to be Europe to North America, and I think that's been looked at many times. And it's not to say Europe is wrong. I think a lot comes down to transfer and delay and things of when they get people. Like I think that ours are obtained fairly quickly, and I think sometimes theirs are delayed just getting to the centers that they're at. So it's it really comes down to choices, So
do you think that was one of the main differences between the North American and the German or the Pape article versus the North American articles? Why was there such a higher ARDS rate?
Yeah, I don't, we looked at that multi different ways and we couldn't really show why. I think they really focused on damage control and they thought that was a big thing. And I think it really did bring it to the forefront, and that was their goal. And I think the problem is it was taken like everything and applied to all the patients, that we had to do damage control on everybody, which was, we were trying to say, don't do that, right? So I think there was a little bit of pushback from North America, say, we don't want to do external fixators on everybody. So which ones do we have to do it on? So it kind of fine-tuned it a bit. I think when the dust all cleared, both groups agreed that that's probably right. So I think the groups really have settled into a pretty similar pattern when you talk to them now. They're not doing as much damage control, and we're not doing as much, immediate eye nail. So I think we're both thinking a little bit more about the other guy's study, and we've sort of made a nice compromise, I think, that's helped our patients.
Okay. And on that note, any other feedback or reviews or critiques that this paper received at the time of publication or since?
No, this one didn't. Well, this one didn't receive as much as what I say. Pape stole the show on that one. He got most of the reviews on that. But I think our paper, the initial paper, got a lot of feedback on, because people really liked unreamed nails, and we were saying they weren't that good. And it was repeated over and over, and it was showing that unreamed nails were just not as good as the reamed nails. So that really was a change in practice that people doing them now don't really get, because they just always unreamed nails, not a big deal. So it just seems, so I think that was the change in practice. The ARDS picture was really hard to show because you needed so many patients to indicate it. So I don't think we had a real show-stopping paper in that one, but I think we had enough to say that we could do more papers to prove that you didn't have to do damage control all the time. So that was good. Great. Opened the door for other studies. Yeah.
And how was it executed as part of the COTS group?
Yeah, well, in the COTS group, we come up with a plan, as you know, and then we you're prepared for the group. There's 16 academic centers in the group plus community centers, and then we decide on a protocol and then reach out to people to see who want to be involved. And normally, when you finish up, although 8 or 10 sites start out, usually about 6 sites finish it and carry out the randomized trial. But it's a randomized, so you pick it out, and it's completely randomized when you enter the inclusion criteria. Then you go to one group or the other, and that's carried out until we feel that we've reached the end of the study, either by nature of we've completed what we think we would find, or it gets to a point where if you went any further, you'd have to recruit so many patients it would be ridiculous to try and keep on going. So.
And I mentioned one of the key findings, but can you tell us in your own words, what was the main takeaway from this study?
Yeah, so our hypothesis was that, if we didn't do as much damage to the intramedullary canal, that the unreamed nail, although it had a higher complication rate in the majority of patients, we thought maybe that the unreamed nail might be safer in that group that developed ARDS, and as it turned out, it wasn't. So minimally reamed nails were just as safe as unreamed nails, and they had the positive value of having less complications as they went out. So you could get a bigger screw size, and mostly you could go from a 4mm screw to a 5mm locking screw, and that made a big difference as far as breakage was concerned. So our hypothesis did not prove correct in our group, and then when we looked at it, we thought you'd have to get about 30,000 patients into it to actually show a difference. So our percentage, and I think Bob O'Toole told the same thing, is only about a 2% or 1% ARDS rate. So when you only have a 2% difference in your groups, there's got to be an astronomical number of patients to show a big difference. So no one's really attempted that study, and I think that's appropriate given the numbers. Yeah.
And then do you think any improvements or modifications you would have made to the study originally, or make to any spin-off studies that might follow from it? And do you think further study is required on this question?
I think it's going to would take a lot of patients to do this. As we mentioned in our group, we looked at the percentages, and Bob O'Toole has the same numbers, 2% or 1.5%. With that size of difference, you're really looking at thousands of patients to show a big difference. So I'm not sure it's worth the cost of the study to determine when the incidence is so low and seems to be about the same. I think that you're probably not worthwhile for ARDS. I think we want to do something in nails to see what's a better nail. That would be a good study to do, because we always shown is that reamed is better than unreamed. We haven't shown what style reaming, what kind of nail, a tan fan versus which entry point's the best, whether you put 1 screw, 2 screws. There's a lot of things there that I think I'd look at for sure. But I don't think ARDS would be a big look from my standpoint. I think they're really sick, they go to damage control. I think if they're otherwise well and you get them within 24 hours, the majority can be treated with a minimally reamed nail. Yeah. And the one thing we did around the same time, we looked at mechanically looking at pressures, and one of these things that came up in our pressure readouts was that the first thing that goes down the canal gives you the highest pressure. So if you put an unreamed nail down, you actually get the same pressures in a patient's femur as you do putting a reamed nail down. So the first nail that goes down there, whether you put a 9mm reamer or an 8mm reamer, it throws up the highest pressures. So you're really not saving anything. If you put an unreamed nail down, you actually have the same pressures as a reamed nail, and it sustains itself a bit longer. So the curve kind of looks a little less peaked. It sort of goes up and it goes high and goes long, goes through, but the peak pressures are the same. So that was kind of surprising, but made sense then. If you combine that with what you saw clinically, no difference in the ARDS rate. So makes sense.
One of the things I noticed was the unreamed group got a solid nail and the reamed group got a cannulated nail. Do you think a cannulated nail versus a solid nail changes the pressure?
No, because the highest pressure when you do a reamed nail is with the first pass reamer. It doesn't matter whether it's an 8 or a 9 or a 10. Whatever you pass the first reamer with down the canal, that's your highest peak pressure.
So in terms of a critique of the paper, we kind of addressed the power analysis at this point. In terms of isolating chest injury patients, when I look at Pepe's study, he was looking specifically at those severely chest injured. I didn't see that in this study specifically, rather than just injury severity.
It was just randomized, and we thought we felt that we would capture the same amount or relatively the same amount of both groups, which we seem to do that. But we didn't actually say, further secondary randomize and do, okay, chest injured patient, now randomize those. We didn't do that. Now, as it turned out, they seem to be about the same in both groups anyway, but we didn't do that on purpose. So that would be a critique for sure. If you said, okay, we're going to double randomize, put them in, Reamed versus Unreamed, and then say, okay, if they have chest injury, we're going to randomize them again to make sure those are equal in both groups. That'd be a good critique. Now, Bob O'Toole did that when he looked at resuscitation, at those things. He looked at really chest injuries and looked at, as long as you resuscitate the patient well, so the lactate was good, the ventilation parameters were good, and the patient was relatively stable, then there was no difference between their outcome and the literature in Germany. So, which is what the big comparison was, as we were talking about.
So in summary, your main take home from this study in 2021.
So I think those are the take home messages. Look at damage control as a separate event. Look at the initial event should be millimeter ream nails, and then go to the other things when you get delayed or the patient gets delayed in transfer.
Perfect. Well, I never shared my screen, but
You can share it now if you want.
I'll share it now.
Yeah.
Just so everyone can see, this is the study we're referring to. And thank you, Dr. Leighton, for taking the time to share your insights and thoughts on the paper.
My pleasure. Nice to see you.